Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. I hope that you are very well. My name is Lizzie and today we're going to be doing my top 5 series of books. This is a part 2 to the top 5 standalone books, so you can go and check that one out as well. Like with the standalone books, they're not in any particular order, they're just my 5 favourites. They're all series that I have completed. There's no sort of unknown endings here. And they're all series where I read all or the majority of them before this year. So they've stood the test of time. So without further ado, let's get to them. Series number 1 is the Discworld series by Terry Pratchett. Is anyone surprised? No. They should not be. Discworld is a 41 book plus extra companion things fantasy series set on the Discworld, which is a flat world carried on the backs of 4 elephants on the back of a giant turtle that's swimming through space. It does sound very intimidating when you put it like that. What's so great about Discworld is that rather than be one continuous story, every single book stands on its own as its own plot. There are some sort of mini-series within the series that follow the same characters over and over again, but you could pick up basically any Discworld book and be able to follow the story. This variety is one of many reasons that I love it so much, that no matter what I'm in the mood for, there is something in this one series, because pretty much every genre is covered at some point. Discworld started off as a parody of other fantasy books, so it has all of the main elements you would expect to see in fantasy. You've got wizards and witches and dwarves and trolls and elves, all of those things, but always with a bit of a spin on it. It's never quite as you expect, and Terry Pratchett uses these well-known tropes and figures and things like that to explore a lot of really interesting ideas. So some books are kind of a clear parody of something. For example, there's a sort of Dracula parody, there's a Macbeth parody. Some of them are full-on fantasy adventures, and some of them are very sort of philosophical deep dives into what is the true meaning of humanity. But also it's a metaphor for Santa Claus. It's a wild series and it's so good. I love it so much. It will always have a near and dear place in my heart. So although these aren't ranked, that's definitely number 1. It's number 1. The second series that made it onto the shortlist is the Shades of Magic trilogy by V.E. Schwab. This is a booktube favourite. A lot of people know it, a lot of people love it. I among them. So the Shades of Magic series is set across multiple Londons that all have different levels of magic. So our London is Grey London, and that's where there's no sort of innate magic there, but magic that's brought in from other worlds can sort of work. Then you've got Red London, which is a sort of typical high fantasy nation. You've got White London, where everything has been sort of corrupted by the power and the strength of the magic. And then Black London, which is just completely uninhabitable. And we follow the main characters, Kel, who is an adopted prince in Red London, and Lila Bard, who is a thief from Grey London, as they go on magical adventures together. And it's so good. It's so good. As well as the big fantasy adventures, you're on an emotional roller coaster of a trilogy, and the conclusion, the final book, is just so fantastic. It's such a cool approach to fantasy worlds. All the characters are amazing. I love it. I love it. I love it. There is a bit of a fantasy theme to this list. I think, fantasy tends to be series, so 4 out of the 5 are fantasy-ish. The 5th one is an ish. But the next one is another fantasy, and that is the Nightrunner series by Lynn Flewelling. This is a 7-book series following the adventures of Serigil and Alec, 2 Nightrunners, basically just like thieves, criminals for hire, spies. They're just cool like ninja people basically. And on one level, then the Nightrunner series is your classic high fantasy. You know, you've got wizards, you've got elves, you've got dragons, you've got necromancers. It's like a D&D campaign in a book. But there's more to it than that. The way that Lynn Llewellyn writes characters, you can't help but fall in love with them. And you just want to go on that journey, follow them through every step of the way, all through the twists and turns, which are sometimes a little bit weird. There are some strange moments in this series. But the true shining star of the series is the relationship between Sergil and Alec. They have a slow burn romance for the first couple of books that you're just there every step of the way. Every step. I remember when I first started reading the first one, and because it looks like kind of generic 90s high fantasy, I was like, this will be fun. Probably nothing to write home about. This will be fun. And you got the two male leads and they got their banter and you're like, yeah, nothing's ever going to happen because it's fantasy. And then it did. Would highly recommend. The next series on this list is the only one that is 100% not fantasy, and that is the Unwind series by Neil Shusterman. This is a YA dystopian series that is set in a sort of near future where unwanted teenagers are harvested for their organs. It's very dark. Very dark. The first book was actually written in the sort of early 2000s, and the rest of the series was completed when the sort of boom of YA dystopia came along with the Hunger Games and Maze Runner and all of those. We know them all. And it's so good. I think it is the best YA dystopian series, and I've chosen that hill. That's my hill. Allow me to explain. What sets the Unwind series apart from all the others is, and you know, this is great about the kind of other series, is that you have the sort of rebel who joins the rebellion and they sort of bring down the government, and yeah, the whole thing finishes when they bring down the government. Which is, you know, it's great, it's fun. What I love with the Unwind series is that it really shows the actual process that you would go through to create that level of societal change. So you've got activists, you do have sort of rebels, and you have people who are lobbying the government, you have people who are making political statements, and you see over the course of the books the gradual change in public opinion that leads to the end of the barbaric practice of unwinding teenagers. It's also just amazingly written. It's so well written. There are points where I would read them and just have like chills. I remember I was reading the last one in a coffee shop, and someone I knew came into the coffee shop and was like, oh hey, and I was like, ah, because I was so into the book and so just like just sucked in there that I did not realise where it was. So if you enjoy dystopias, if you enjoy anything sort of political, definitely read the Unwind series. And last but by absolutely no means least, His Dark Materials by Philip Pullman. This is what I meant when I was like, is it fantasy? Is it not fantasy? Because on one level it is fantasy, but only fantasy because of the science fiction. This series follows Lyra, who is a young girl who lives in a parallel universe where every human has a demon, which is their soul essentially manifested in the form of an animal. And in the first book, one of her best friends goes missing, and so she goes to go and rescue him, to find him, and gets caught up in inter-universal warfare / prophecies / Philip Pullman's particular brand of atheism. It's very strange, but just so good. It's so good. This is one of those series that every few years I come back to and every few years it's even better than it was the previous time I read it. I think, still in primary school when I first read this trilogy, and I've come back to it so many times, and every time I get something new from it, I notice new things. And I mean, the last time I read it, I was just blown away by the intricacy and the level of world building and sort of creation of this scientific, this sci-fi thing. Just completely blew me away. The writing is beautiful. It's so imaginative. It's unlike anything I've ever read and ever will read. It is fantasy on the surface, but it's pure science fiction in the best possible way. That being said, I love the His Dark Materials trilogy. I enjoy some of the novellas. I have some thoughts on the Secret Commonwealth, the latest one that came out, but that's for another video. So we're not counting that one. That's a separate issue. The main three are just so good. They're so good. They're definitely ones I'm going to come back to again and again and again. And I'm so excited for series 3 of the TV show. That is it for my top 5 favourite series. If you have read or enjoyed any of the series that I've mentioned today, then let me know in the comments, or let me know what your favourite series are. Which ones would you recommend that absolutely everyone should read? Thank you very much for joining me, and I will see you next time. Bye!